Welcome back to the Tulsa World Sports Extra podcast. I'm your host, Juwan Lee, joined again by OU beat writer Mason Young, OSU beat writer Tyler Waldrep, and columnist Bill Haisten. Some breaking news early Tuesday morning coming out of Stillwater, Oklahoma center Brandon Garrison making his announcement that he's transferring to Kentucky. Guys, I want to get your immediate reactions to what we heard this morning. Tyler, I'll kick it off with you first.
Yeah, I think this was expected when Steve Lutz was introduced. He talked about meeting with the players and giving them the pitch to sort of come back to the program, the guys that entered the transfer portal. And he said some guys have already made it clear they have no intention of coming back. I think Brandon was probably in that group that sort of already had his mind made up that he was leaving. Um, I think it's no surprise. I think he probably had the highest potential on this team, talent wise. But I think he more so than maybe some of the other guys looked lost at times down the stretch and just maybe not sure what to do or where to be. And I think that contributed to his fouls. Just I don't know. Overall, I think it's just a kind of disappointing end for a guy that could have been an Oklahoma State great.
Bill.
I'm astounded that from a 6'11" McDonald's All-American who played high school basketball in Oklahoma, a guy I saw play many times, I say many, maybe 6 or 8 times, Juwan, in high school, that Oklahoma State was only able to get 7.5 points a game and this kid got 5 shot attempts per game on average. That's
Wow.
unbelievable to me. And that's one of the reasons why they have a new coaching staff over there now. So I sensed from Coach Lutz during his introductory news conference that some of those guys on the roster he did want them to stay, but not a lot of them. I mean, they weren't very good and they didn't have an identity offensively. But Brandon Garrison has an NBA body, I believe, an NBA future, and I believe that Kentucky, we will see a completely different Brandon Garrison. So I don't blame him for making the move. And I had heard what he was asking for from an NIL standpoint. And I think Kentucky's far more able and willing to pay that kind of money than Oklahoma State was.
Well, and the other thing that's really intriguing about Brandon Garrison's decision is the domino effect it has on the rest of college basketball, especially the schools in the region. I mean, besides Kentucky and a potential return to OSU, you were looking at OU and Arkansas that were among his suitors. He visited Arkansas over the weekend, and I kind of thought to myself, man, like they're going to have good NIL as Bill has reported for us. Why wouldn't you want to play for a coach like John Calipari who has that that NBA track record of developing players? And then all of a sudden Kentucky enters the chat and he has the opportunity to go there and be part of the new surge of Kentucky basketball. We'll be curious to see, how this affects OSU's roster, what they have to do to replenish down low. But this also has a big effect on OU because Garrison, by all accounts, was like their number one transfer portal target. And so now they're going to be in the position where they have to find another big to pair with fifth-year senior Sam Godwin down low for next season, somebody that can play defense and rebound effectively when Godwin isn't on the floor.
That's a great segue about where it leaves OSU's roster. At the start of the basketball season, Bill, I know you raved about Brandon Garrison. Where do you feel this leaves Steve Lutz as we continue on through this offseason process?
Well, it's just, 6'11" and a guy, what really sets Brandon Garrison apart from so many guys is his ability to run the floor. He is, and he played so well and was used in a way in the Baylor game to open the conference schedule, Juwan. They used him in a what I thought was a perfect way for an athletic big like him or a big man like him, and they just couldn't continue with that. And he did foul too much, and that was a factor in a lot of ball games. But where does that leave Lutz? It's impossible for me to say now until he gets that, until I see the complete composition of what roster he'll go into this season with. And because of the portal now, it's a 65 to 80% roster rebuild for most programs from year to year. So I can't state with any clarity, what they're going to look like without Brandon Garrison. But it'll be a very interesting summer, because these guys do a lot more in the summer, Juwan, than most people realize with regard to college basketball. So it'll be a big summer because that's your time to get chemistry going, right? But I do know that 6'11" guys who run like Brandon Garrison are rare, and you're not going to replace that.
Tyler, any further comments on where this leaves Steve Lutz moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's Oklahoma State's definitely a work in progress, more so than I think every team in college basketball is in transition, is a work in progress this time of year. I think it's rare the teams that are even remotely close to a finished product, or even, if you can predict 3 of the team starters next season, you're probably in a good spot. I think Steve Lutz had a great weekend. Getting a couple guys to commit, getting Bryce Thompson to come back to sign on to stay another year. I think that's big for the program, just especially this first year. Getting the nation's leaders in steals per game, I think is a big deal. So, and that's Arturo Dean. I probably mispronounced it, but I think that's a big pickup. So yeah, I mean, we'll have to see where this goes.
Moving on to Bedlam softball that's upcoming this weekend. Mason, I would love to know from you, what are some under the radar players that we're not talking about as we approach this heated rivalry?
Well, I think somebody in terms of underrated that's going to play a really big role in this series is Kirsten Deal for OU. She's been absolutely dominant in her last several starts, but I actually want to flip this to over the radar, because I think the big player, big name that we're all thinking about going into this series is Kelly Maxwell. I mean, she transfers from OSU to OU and has yet to play her former team since that occurred, and since Kenny Gajewski, OSU's coach, was very vocal and very disappointed in that move. And so we'll see if we get to talk to Kelly Maxwell this week before it all goes down, and kind of get her reflection on how that all transpired before this series. But she's been a dominant ace for OU. I mean, she's been the pitcher that they've been able to count on consistently throughout the entire season. And fortunately, Deal has come along in the last few weeks, and that's given them a really good number 2. So those 2 lefties being the 1-2 punch for OU going into this Bedlam series, I think is going to be a big deal. And but most fascinated to see what if any interactions look like between Maxwell and her former teammates and her former coach this weekend.
Tyler, any players you're watching this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't think we have enough time to talk about the under the radar players that Oklahoma State has that need to play well this series if the Cowgirls are going to have a chance. From a pitching rotation, Ivy Rosenberry, number 2 pitcher. I think her ERA right now is right around 1.1. They're going to need her best stuff this weekend. Freshman Carly Godwin recently set the program's freshman home run record at 12, and that's still going. So I imagine she has at least a couple more left in her this season. Someone who I don't think is under the radar, but maybe if for whatever reason, maybe you dipped out of Oklahoma State softball to watch March Madness or something else the last, say, 3-4 weeks. Maybe you've been watching the NBA, the end of the NBA season. You missed out on Jillian Poulard. She went from being out of the lineup to leading off and honestly being, I think, Oklahoma State's most consistent bat. I mean, just that the sort of midseason turnaround has been incredible. She had 2 home runs on senior day, and I don't think that's a surprise. I think honestly it would have been a surprise if she didn't hit at least 1 the way she's been playing. I think she might. I think Oklahoma State, if they're going to win this weekend, I think Jillian Poulard has to have an incredible game.
Bill, players on your radar?
Anytime there's a evenly matched, whether it's baseball or softball, anytime you got evenly matched teams with excellent pitching, that whoever is going to win 2 of 3 or sweep or whatever, the team that wins the weekend will be the one that gets the most production from the lower third, offensively from the lower third of the order. We'll see. So those, instead of me reciting names, a bunch of names, I can tell you those 3 women on each side in the lower third of the batting order. Those are the key people in this series.
Sticking with our local teams, Tyler mentioned people watching March Madness and the NBA playoffs, but people have also been tuned into the NFL draft, which was this past week. OSU didn't have any players drafted. OU only 3 players drafted, fewest since 2007. Mason, what I want to get from you is which undrafted players on your radar are you looking forward to possibly making a roster?
Well, I think the guy that every OU fan wants to see make a roster and have success in the NFL is Drake Stoops. He ends up signing with the LA Rams on Saturday after going undrafted, and really like the fit from the standpoint of obviously, LA has 2 really notable receivers in Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua that, maybe can teach Drake a few things about how to be a professional, obviously with the track record of success that Kupp has and the outstanding rookie season that Nacua had last year. But it's going to be tough for Drake to make a roster, as it is, for anybody that goes undrafted. I think you're looking at him as somebody that can, maybe make a play on special teams. He's going to have to, pay his dues for a few years as a gunner, or maybe like the, second or third, one of the backline options as a returner on punt or kickoff or something like that. He's really going to have to work and grind to get that opportunity, but if anybody will, it's him, because obviously, right, he came from being a walk-on, a 3-star recruit that, if not for his last name, probably would have had a lot more anonymity to being OU's, most productive receiver last year across the board. So feel confident in his ability. The other guy to watch, Andrew Rain, OU center who signed with the Carolina Panthers. He if they were going to have 4 guys drafted, he would have been that 4th guy. He was probably right on the edge there, and maybe he has an opportunity to give Bill Bedenbaugh another productive NFL offensive lineman after he's now had 14, I think 13 or 14 drafted in the past 10 years, which is pretty remarkable.
First of all, Mason, see, Andrew Rain was a 9th grade starter at Broken Arrow and was ragdolling, I mean, mashing guys in 6A1, right? So I guess the point of that is it shows you the greatness of NFL athletes, right? If Andrew Rain is a fringe guy, because he was the most dominant offensive lineman I've seen in 30 whatever years at the Tulsa World at the high school level. But I guess my takeaway stat, instead of speculating on who might of the undrafted guys, or for that matter, drafted guys who might make a roster, my takeaway from the weekend is that this held up once again. But over the last 14 drafts, Mason, the average number of, now granted, several of those years, like the SEC had more teams, right? During the 10-team period for the Big 12, whatever. But on the whole, this still speaks volumes to the difference between the Big 12 and the SEC with regard to talent. But the average over the last 14 drafts, fellas, has been that the SEC had 65 players drafted and the Big 12 25 players drafted. That's an average, and that is what OU's going into, and OU has got to step up its game with regard to signing guys on that level and developing them, and getting the results you want to get from them, and then shipping them to the league. And OU is not there yet, but that's the obvious mission now for Brent Venables and Bill Bedenbaugh and the rest of them.
Yeah, not a great weekend for Oklahoma State. Nobody winning the draft. A couple guys did get their chance, to sign some undrafted free agent deals. Afterwards, they'll get the chance to sort of go prove it and try to earn a roster spot, or at least a practice squad spot, which there's still some decent money to be made for these guys. if I had to pick two, Oklahoma State had several. I would probably start with defensive end Anthony Goodlow. Well known in this area, Del City, Tulsa. He was kind of the most just sort of among some of the NFL analysts. He was the Oklahoma State guy that some analysts thought was a priority signing after the draft. So at least for the analysts that they sort of thought he had something to prove going into this. The guy I would just take a stab on though would be running back Elijah Collins, only at Oklahoma State, one season, kind of limited with what he could do just because of an injury, but played for Michigan State before that and played pretty well there. Just his numbers, he didn't have a big role, but his numbers, like just in yards after contact, stuff like that, from a metric standpoint, he shined. So, maybe if Ollie's not there, or maybe if he doesn't have that injury, maybe Elijah Collins gets to kind of prove himself a little more, and this doesn't seem as crazy. So also the league may not want to draft running backs, but they need a lot of running backs because those guys get injured. So if a team's going to find an extra spot for a guy, running back's going to be one of the spots they're looking for some extra bodies. So, I would say Oklahoma State fans can keep their fingers crossed for Elijah Collins. He has a chance.
I totally agree with the fact that NFL teams need to start prioritizing running backs a little bit more. I'm a Cowboys fan, and I may be looking at Ezekiel Elliott be running back one this year. So we're going to our final segment of the show. It's our parting shots. One take to leave the audience with until next week. Bill, let's kick it off with you.
Well, I would just say the Thunder, I think if you keep in mind, Vegas preseason had the Thunder season win total over and under at 44 or 45 games, right? So they go to 57 on the regular season total. I think, in my mind, the reasonable expectation for this team, this super young team, was to win a series. Get it right, get in the playoffs, don't mess around with the play-in, get in the playoffs, win a series, and after that, it would be all of a bonus. Anything beyond that would be an incredible bonus. I don't feel that way now. I mean, I see the Clippers are beat up. Kawhi Leonard, I say the Clippers are beat up. Kawhi Leonard isn't 100%, and therefore the Clippers aren't as what they should or could be. And then I see Dallas and Luka Doncic is a little chewed up right now, right? So I'm thinking, wow. With home court advantage, can Oklahoma City win another series against the Clippers or the Mavericks? Yes, they can. So, I mean, the ceiling just, as before our eyes, right? The ceiling just keeps getting a little bit higher on this team. And so they have a few days to rest. SGA needs that rest. He couldn't even make a free throw in the fourth quarter last time. He was so so it's an amazing season. I don't know that it's fully appreciated as it should be because it's happening as we speak, right? And I think a lot of people are late kind of coming to the party on this, but it's an amazing season for the Thunder, considering the second youngest team in the league, and considering that we're only 2 years removed from a 24-58 season for these guys, and now here we are. And I'm thinking now, man, these guys should win in that next round. And here we go with the Denver, Oklahoma City conference finals in about 3 weeks. I'd love to see that.
All right, Tyler, parting shot.
Yeah, I mean, the draft just finished up, but I'm kind of more excited for football than ever. I think the content might be just incredible. We had Saban both praising guys in the draft and taking shots at guys, and he alleged that he at least wanted to tamper, whether maybe he did tamper with the Toledo player. We have Bill Belichick with McAfee taking shots at NFL teams left and right, and he's gonna do that in the fall. Jason Kelsey, I think, is gonna go to somewhere, I think ESPN. I don't normally care that much about the commentary surrounding the game, but I might have to start recording some of these pregame shows. So yeah, I'm excited for that, surprisingly enough.
Mason.
Well, I was really down and hard on Porter Moser last week. I'm going to be a little bit more compassionate this week, given some of the movement that's happened. Obviously, things didn't work out with the initial plan. It kind of looked like with the transfer portal, OU was going to try to bring a lot of local guys home. They missed on Kevin Overton. They missed on Sean Padula. And now obviously they missed on Brandon Garrison. And, you don't like that. That's not positive. But, they finally have started to at least accumulate some bodies in the transfer portal. They got Kobe Elvis, who's a veteran guard from Dayton, Jaden Jones, 1,000-point scorer at Long Beach State, and getting yesterday Bryson Goodine from Fairfield, who was one of the nation's best three-point shooters last year. So things may be looking up a little bit, at least in the sense that OU now actually has filled some of the scholarships that were opened up by the transfer portal and graduation departures. But is it going to be enough in the end? I don't know. I'm thinking not. I'm thinking that this transfer portal class for Moser isn't going to be nearly as good as last year's, just based on who they have right now and who they may still be able to get. And with that, the likelihood increases that they will miss the NCAA tournament for a fourth straight season. And who knows what happens after that.
All right, for another episode of the Tulsa World Sports Podcast, I'm your host, Juwan Lee Mason, for Tyler, for Bill. We'll see you guys next week.